The DPad Mini 64 was a revolutionary redesign of the original Nintendo 64 controller. When I reviewed it here on Rerez, I explained why I thought it was the best controller ever made for the N64. But supply can be scarce in North America, and they've been out of production for a while, and were only really sold in Japan. And if you do find one, it will be pretty pricey and far from in new condition. But one company is bringing this reinvented classic forward to 2019. Meet the Tribute 64 from Retrobit. They sent some in for review, and I'm very excited to see if these new controllers hold up against the DPad Mini 64. So let's get playing. What I loved most about the DPad Mini 64 was it took everything Nintendo's controller did and repackaged it into a more attractive form factor. But I never got to play a new version of the controller because I picked up mine secondhand at a game swap. But with the Tribute 64, we finally have a more readily available and affordable option for the best in N64 gaming, and it's a new, solid build that will last you a long time, probably longer than a 20-year-old DPad at this point. The Tribute 64 comes in 3 color variants that really evoke the classic era of Nintendo 64. Ocean Blue, Forest Green, and Solid Red, and the only thing you're really missing is gray. It's fully compatible with your classic Nintendo 64 console and games, and it has the extension port on the back for your memory cards and Rumble Pack. Rumble works great on here with no problem, and the pack clicks in tightly so you won't hear any rattling when the Rumble activates, like on some third-party controllers. Personally, I think it feels great, just like the DPad did. In my original review of the DPad Mini 64, I loved that it was a lot easier to use compared to Nintendo's original controller. There was only one way to hold the DPad, and it worked beautifully, giving you access to all the buttons with no problems. And I think that's a huge step above the original N64 controller. I'm also a big fan of the improved thumbstick. They included a thumbstick more like what you'd find on the GameCube, which was a lot more precise, and had a much better dead zone than what the original had on the N64. With the redesign, they had to decide where to put the Z trigger, so they moved it up to underneath the shoulder buttons, and they also gave you 2 of them. Now you have one Z trigger on each side, giving you the choice between left or right. When I compared the Tribute 64 against the DPad, I was very impressed. It has the same great feel with an amazing thumbstick and easy to reach buttons. I had no trouble playing any game that I tried, and it does improve on the DPad in one big way, the DPad. The DPad on the Tribute 64 feels much better than on Hori's Mini 64 controller. It's a bit soft, but reliable nonetheless. I know a lot of people complained about the position of the DPad on this controller because they don't like where it is, but I think it's a great place to put it because it's very easy to access with your left or right thumb. Now, look, I get it. D-pads aren't the most important thing when it comes to Nintendo 64 games, because the majority of them don't actually really use the D-pad all that much. But for the few games that do, I think that this is very usable for those games. Now, I do have one major criticism for the Tribute 64. The Z triggers and shoulder buttons are a little loose, giving them more play than I would like. And this can cause a problem if you don't hit them squarely every time. There are dead zones where if you push the button, your input won't register, but if you press them firmly, they will register properly. I would have preferred them to be tighter and more responsive no matter where you push them, but that's just one fault with the controller. So far, I've covered pretty much everything you need to know about the Tribute 64 Classic Edition, but Retrobit has also made a USB port edition of this controller. The feel of each is exactly the same, and it comes in the same color variants, but the USB controller comes with 3 distinct differences. The first difference being the Z triggers. On the classic port controller, they are mirrored Z inputs, and on the USB version, they are individual inputs. The second being the rumble. Although the USB version has the molding for the extension port, if you look inside, it's empty with no connector pins. I typically wouldn't mind this, but it also doesn't have built-in rumble in the controller, so you'd be missing out on that while using it on games that support vibration. And the third and final, as well as PC, the USB version works with Mac, PS3, and Nintendo Switch. However, due to the lack of modern buttons, you might have issues playing certain games on PS3 and Switch with this controller, so I can't really recommend it. I like all these features, but personally, I don't find the USB controller to be worth it. If you're looking to play Nintendo 64 games on your PC, then this is the controller for you. But if you're looking to play any relatively modern games, then you're better off using an Xbox One or 360 controller. With either of those, you have built-in rumble plus an additional thumbstick. Also, the D-pad, in my opinion, is better on the Xbox One controller. All in all, I really like the Tribute 64. It feels good to use and it is a great modern solution for N64 gaming, but I could only suggest picking up the USB model for the specific use of emulating N64 games on your PC. For anything else, I just can't recommend it. But if you're looking for a new N64 controller for your original N64 console, I would highly recommend the Tribute 64 Classic Port Edition.